Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Rosini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Great to be with you again, Dr. Paul.
Very good. I want to talk a little bit about health matters, the crisis in the flu and the crisis in our marketplace and how they may be combined. But there has been a lot of talk about it, and right now there's a so-called epidemic going on with the flu. I've spoken out already. I don't think it's quite what is described in the media, and it's risky to say, well, don't worry too much, there's not much to it. It's serious, but it's nothing what they're talking about. It isn't like this is an epidemic that is going to wipe out a whole population, and I sure hope that is not the case, because right now it doesn't seem that way. It's a flu virus that's been around a long time, and there's a lot of cases, but not that many dying from that. I think only one person in the United States died from it, but people are scared from it, and our government is stirring up the fear. But it's something that I think can be handled. And yet the markets get very nervous about this. But I think the markets are overreacting. I think our government overreacts. I think that there's a lot of fear. And I think it's, in a way, a distraction. The markets are rocky right now. Why are they crashing down 400 or 500 points? And they're very shaky. The stock markets are not up for this year now. And they say, well, it has to do with the flu virus or something like that. But no, it has to do with the fact that the markets were probably too high because the Fed printed too much money and there is too much speculation in the market, and they were due to go down. And I think they're due to go down a lot more because it's artificial, but there has to be a bit of distraction, and that's part of what's going on. And the distraction said that it's other things that go on that cause this, and therefore all we have to do is take care of those problems and scare people a little bit more, distract them from what's happening. But I think that the distraction and the manipulation is the biggest concern that we have immediately. But the big concern is, of course, the Federal Reserve. This whole thing is a consequence of Federal Reserve monetary policy, a lot of debt and a lot of malinvestment. But if they can take the blame from that and put it over into something else and not the responsibility of the monetary managers or the spendthrifts that we have, the military interventionists, and all of these things, they don't want to talk about the real cause. Of course, that's the Federal Reserve financing the welfare warfare state. And that is what we're facing. But I think it's real serious on what's happening because of the misunderstanding of what's going on and the fact that because the markets are so distorted, there will be corrections. And that is what's happening now. The markets were down sharply today, and that doesn't mean there is a problem and it's all due to the flu or something like that. I see things in two different ways. One, markets are destined to do what they have to do. They either go up very fast because of easy credit, and then they make their corrections. But the people really determine what's going to happen. And right now, people are a little bit frightened, and there's a contest going on. Politically, a contest is going on because of what is going to be coming in the near future. That's what we have to anticipate. I think it's government spending and government fiat and government intrusion in our lives, government intrusion in the business cycle. All these things are the problem. But I think we're still threatened. I think we're going to have a serious problem, and that's what's breaking through now. People are getting very worried about what happens, but I think the crisis is big and going to get worse. But they can't say that, it's due to the flu epidemic, because I've talked about it already and may talk a little bit more about it today. But the flu epidemic, there's a lot of people getting the flu, but not a whole lot of people are dying, fortunately, from the flu. And that is the coronavirus, or the real flu is very, very big. and very, very dangerous, and they don't even talk about that. I mean, thousands of people are getting it. There's 62,000 people, I think, in the world that's had this and died from it. But right now, we're talking about a few hundred people, and it's not to belittle the problem about, on this particular virus. It's the whole fact that it's blown out of proportion compared to what already exists, and there's a lot of politics that go on with this.
That's correct, Dr. Paul. And regular viewers of our show will recall that we always say that, the focus has to be kept off of the Federal Reserve. There's always going to be some story to pin blames on downward spirals and crises. It's to keep it off the Fed. So, and we noticed something, me and Dr. Paul this week. I think it was a Fed official who said that they're going to prevent recessions, no more than 5%. Don't worry. The Fed is powerful, and even if that were true, they're basically saying you don't have a market. This is a farce. And that's exactly what it is. We don't have a real market. They mess everything up by distorting the economy and printing money and distorting prices. And prices are supposed to tell the truth about supply and demand, what's to be produced, how much of it, what's the demand for it, where is it to be produced. And, the Soviets, they tried to completely abolish prices altogether, and boy, did that backfire on them. It didn't last very long, and they didn't try it again, because you're totally in the dark without prices. Here in the West, we manipulate prices. They're not going to abolish prices, but they're going to try to manipulate it for the power elite's benefit at the expense of everyone else. And as a result, they've created a total mess.
Right, and the conditions now are getting a lot of people to endorse and justify, quarantines. I think for people in the United States right now to be put under quarantine make no sense whatsoever. And they will say that if they just do that will take care of the problems. But I don't think the problem exists that big. Usually quarantines don't work, and they will use this. But what usually happens in a crisis like this is people have less liberty because, there's an intrusion and a takeover and a blame going on, and there will be a lot of money spent. But I just don't think it justifies quarantines. It justifies people making choices. Right now, I think the concerns are way overblown. But let's say the people are reacting already in a certain way. Yes, there's governments now restricting air travel and things like this, but there's a lot of people just doing it on their own. And if they think they're living in a dangerous place, they can avoid the crowds or, take care of themselves. But that doesn't exist here. I think right now there's just been, a couple people in this country die, and yet there's 8,000 deaths in this country from regular flu and 650,000 cases and deaths around the world, just old-fashioned flu. But this virus that's going on now, it's creating a bit of hysteria and overreaction, and I think that's dangerous.
Right, and Dr. Paul, when the crisis finally hits, the party may be over, but it doesn't mean that the suffering for the average person will be over, because those who wield power and who live at the expense of everyone else, they're going to want to maintain that lifestyle. They're not just going to throw in the towel and let free markets reign. So during crises, they're going to continue to do the worst things, just on a greater scale in order to save themselves. And we see this already in different areas of our lives. Think of the Middle East and Afghanistan for 19 years. They've just been doing the wrong thing on greater scale. President Trump has dropped the most bombs out of, they just double down and double down. They don't stop. Same thing with healthcare. Government ruined it decades ago by jumping in and intervening in every single aspect of healthcare. And Dr. Paul, who is a physician, knows the difference. He knows what it was like before government ruined it and today. But what's the solutions that are being provided? Total government takeover. So this is what people in power do. They create policies to save themselves, to keep their privileged lifestyle. And that's why we may be in for a long recession, depression, because they're just going to keep doubling down.
Well, very good, and it's so true. And a lot of people will come up with, as they see the market going down, the interpretation will always be there's a shortage of money. which is exactly opposite of what the problem is. The problem is too much fiat money, too much distortion of interest rates, too much endorsement of debt. So that is the problem. They think they can solve it. But politically, the people who advocate this, the bailouts and the increased expenditures, they win the political argument, except they just make the bubble worse. And that's the real calamity. The bubble, when it bursts, they always say more and more government. Of course, we have so much now anyway, but they do not trust the markets. They think they can control it. They can manipulate it. So if they won't admit that the Fed is involved and that the problems that we face is the Federal Reserve, they're not going to touch it. And there's a bipartisan agreement that you don't really mess with the Fed. But I'll tell you what, they talk a lot more about the Fed and the Fed policy and too much printing money now than they ever did before. Because when I first went into politics in the 70s, nobody was interested in this, and yet we had, the Bretton Woods breaking down everything else. But the system was sacred, and they had to take care of it and protect it. But now there's more concern, but basically policymakers are still saying you spend more money and you keep interest rates low and you bail out anybody that gets into trouble. And this administration is like all the rest. And it sort of conveys confidence to people in the market, and yet it's not the solution. It's making the problem a lot worse. So I think what we'll see now is a continuation of an attempt to bail out, but then there's going to become a dime. And I sort of hope today is a bad day in the stock market. I hope this isn't the real starting point. Of course, it's already started, but I mean a real acceleration of what's happening, because the market is a lot more fragile than anybody realized. And that has a lot of political connotations. And all politicians, Republican, Democrats have generally endorsed the idea of deficit spending, keep interest rates low, manipulate the economy, bail out the people. But there's going to be a limit. And I think that's what's happening is we're reaching that limit. And the confidence is not very strong, in spite of what I'm impressed by are the rallies that Trump gets, because there's still a lot of people who are understanding it, but most of the people there aren't much interested in talking about a serious monetary policy and cutting spending. It's a lot easier to get large number of people to join in and say, we're going to spend more money and we're going to make sure you can get a house with very low interest rates. And yet the problem still exists, because with all those policies of the last decade or so, it's harder now for people to find houses that they can afford, and more people homeless before. So it's not working well. And the big question in my mind, as it is in everybody's mind that knows anything about this economic system, is when is that big one going to come? And I think we get obviously closer and closer, and I don't think we can print our way out of it and deficit finance it. Matter of fact, we have been doing that in a wholesale manner here in the last couple of years, and we've really gotten a little bit of a reprieve, but we haven't had an endorsement of what we really need to do, and that is change the monetary system and change the role of government and change our foreign policy. So we're locked in on that. Republican or Democrat, it's going to continue. So I think our goal has to be to understand economics and politics and why it's important for people to understand, market forces, so they don't get so frightened if the government tries to do the right thing. But I think that's the only thing that can change the direction of the country. But I don't think that can happen without a real bad correction, downfall, depression, or whatever, because everybody is locked in, and they're locked into dependency, and we have a foreign policy. It's going to take an awful lot of embarrassment for us to come home. But in a way, there are hints that the people want us to come home, and I think that that is good. But there'll be a day when we'll have to come home, and the welfare state won't be satisfied just with printing more money. And we're fast approaching that situation. But I don't think the people quite know about this. I think the election is important, but it's not like one side has all the information, the other side does not, because both sides, Republican and Democrat, they basically have fundamentally the same beliefs on economics. Spending is okay, deficits don't matter, we need a world presence, we need to bail out people, and on and on. It's so similar. So that's why I think it's going to be very hard for me to say, rest assured, we will soon work our way out of this because more and more people are waking up. Yes, there are, and that's good. And because that's where the rebuilding will come from. But it's not going to all of a sudden, even though I work in this direction all the time, try to convince people to change their mind. But Washington is not going to change their mind. They're just going to, the more difficult the economy gets, the more authoritarian the government gets. And that is they're capable of doing. But that will not be the problem. And we don't know the ultimate outcome from that, even though I remain with a bit of conviction and belief that the country is capable of moving in the other direction, but it's going to be tough because people have learned to be so dependent on government, and right now it's very, very, very difficult to talk common sense when it comes to politicians passing bills and say, hey, you shouldn't be passing this bill. No, you shouldn't be putting more troops overseas because Republicans and Democrats endorse it. So we have a long way to go to try to prevent this, but I think the effort is what we have to make, because I do see some good signs, more people waking up, and we have to encourage those people that are starting to realize a society based on liberty is so much better than authoritarianism that we hear so much about.
That's very good, Dr. Paul. I'll finish up by saying I do agree. We're probably locked into watching government create a bigger nightmare for everybody, but we're not locked in as individuals to believe them or go along with it. We can have our own philosophies and to guide our individual lives. And a good philosophy, I believe, is, you can't defeat nature, natural and economic laws. You can't make the false true. You can't plan and micromanage other people's lives. To a great extent, you could plan and micromanage your life, but we live with a lot of uncertainty. So those plans have to constantly change. And we talk about politicians and central bankers and how they can't possibly win, but we couldn't either. If Dr. Paul and I decided to form our own bank and try to override supply and demand, we would get squashed ourselves. And it wouldn't matter what our intentions are. If your plans run contrary to what is true, you're going to get squashed. And that's what happens with central planners. The Soviets had lots of plans. They had 5-year plans, followed by another 5-year plans. Plans, and that's what you hear from politicians on the campaign trail, all their plans. They never work.
Right.
So we must adapt to nature. Nature doesn't adapt to us, and government has no special powers to override it.
Very good, Chris. And I'm going to finish up with talking about the current conditions today and what monetary policy is doing, because everybody comes up short of money. We need the government to print more money, spend more money, and it's always a shortage of money. And yet the opposite is true. There's too much, and there's too much debasement of the currencies. There's not enough freedom in the setting of interest rates, and there's too much mischief overseas and independently in economics. And that means it doesn't solve the problems. It makes it worse. And there's too much dependency, on the government to solve these problems. But the whole system can't be solved with fiat money. That you have to restore the basic concept of money. Money has to be something of real value, something that governments and politicians can't create, something that is regulated only by the marketplace. Prices have to be freely set by individuals, and nobody can get bailouts and special privileges. There's something awfully wrong with our system today when in the last decade, $1 trillion has left the hands of the average person and has gone to the hands of the few people. So there's a shift of wealth, and it's not because they are so smart and know how to do it. It's because of the system of fiat money and banking and legislation, which guarantees that the wealthy get wealthier. They control the empire. They control the budgets in Washington, and now there's this division, and the middle class is being wiped out. politically speaking, I think that's the biggest thing people ought to worry about. The consequence of all these bad policy is the wiping out of the middle class, and then the middle class demands more, and then there's a conflict. And then all of a sudden you have a lot of people living in the streets, and you have a lot of more authoritarians coming in and say, well, we know how to take care of it. Look at the far left right now, what they want to do. They want to control everything, not only the printing presses, but the distribution of everything available to them, because they want the power. And that is what is so bad. They should be honing in on a few important issues, and that is individual liberty, the personal right of individuals to run their own life and have a free market economy and honest money, where governments can't print money and then pass it out to their favorite friend. And then also, for us to improve our society, we have to give up on this international mismanagement of the world. We're now in like 120 countries with participating in the mischief of monetary mischief and also military mischief. It's going to end because we're broke and we will be coming home. And so this to me is the most important thing, is that we have a clear understanding of what personal liberty is all about and the responsibility of the individual, rather than saying that there's only a few people, if we just send them to Washington, they'll know what's good for us and they'll take care of us. And then all that does is breed the special interest in the lobbyists to go up and take over. And they're the ones who become rich, not the people who sent them there in the first place. So people have to have a lot more confidence that they can take care of themselves if the government just gets out of the way and do nothing more than guarantee the liberty of each and every one of us as individuals. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.